All right. Well, good evening, everybody. I'm glad that everyone got a chance to make it. My name is Rick Rodríguez. I am one of the senior mentors at 4Geeks Academy. I teach the cohorts. I'm one of the teachers that teaches with the mentors, with the other full stack developer mentors. I teach remotely, and we have um, students from all over the world. We have students from South America and Europe. And I wanted to give you a couple of minutes about that so that you're aware of what 4Geeks has to offer. 4Geeks, as I said, their home headquarters is in Miami, but we are international. We're a coding boot camp, and we offer full stack development, as I said before, as well as data science and machine learning programs. Our programs are part time and online. All students get unlimited one on one mentoring, unlimited group mentoring sessions, access to our Slack channel with over 4,000 developers, and unlimited career support, including resume review, LinkedIn review, GitHub help, mock interviews, and much, much more. There are different scholarships available. And if you want more information, you can contact the admissions team by calling or texting at the number 786 416 6640. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and let me go ahead and copy that as well for everybody here who might be interested. I'm going to put it in the chat. So it's 786 416, and I think it's 6640. Yes. And that is the 4Geeks admission team. All right, cool. So like I said, as you're probably aware, we're going to be working by creating a simple counter. It's basically like a timer, and we're going to be using front-end technologies, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, as well as React.js, which is going to help us write our code using modern technologies. Right? And so for those of you who are new to coding, we're going to do this step by step. We're going to take it nice and easy so that everyone gets an opportunity to do this together. By the end of today's session, you'll have a fully running program that you can add onto your GitHub repository if you have one. And you can add that to your resume or to whatever portfolio that you have to go ahead and show off to others. All right. So I hope that this helps you and adds a little bit more of what you have to show. Okay. Cool. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bring in a blank tab here. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and there's two ways you can start this. If you have VS Code running locally, you can use VS Code locally. There's no problem with that. And if you are a 4Geek student currently and you want to go ahead and use one of our templates, you're more than welcome to do so as well. Give me 1 minute here. Let me go ahead and add. I think he got added as well. Perfect. Excellent. All right. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just go to 4Geeks GitHub. And I'm going to select the templates boilerplates that are available by 4Geeks Academy. All of these boilerplates are free, open sourced, so you're able to access them as a student or not as a student. You can also help contribute if you want to go ahead and modernize some of the boilerplates if you'd like to. There's always something to do, right? And with open source, we always need the help. Now, for those of you who are going ahead and going to be using this template on code spaces, okay, what you're going to do is you're going to click the code button here, And I'm sorry, we're going to go to actually scroll down first, and we're going to use the empty repository. So I'm going to go ahead and open that repository now. Now, if you are part of 4Geeks, you will have this use this template option available. If you do not, you will have, I believe, the code button, and you can open up code spaces through this as well. All right. One of the advantages of being a student is that 4Geeks allows you to use their time on code spaces. So you can make as many projects as you want through them, and it does not waste your personal time. So that's one of the advantages as well. All right. So for my students here who are on here, you're going to click create a new repository under use this template. We're going to choose 4Geeks Academy as the owner. If you do not have that, you can just do it under your personal account. And we're going to go ahead and create a repository name here. I'm going to go ahead and just use my first name and my last initial. And I'm just going to put here a simple counter. I'll put presentation on there just to make this unique. We'll go ahead and click public, and then we will create the repository. And for those of you just using VS Code locally, just open up an instance of VS Code because we'll be using it shortly. For my students who are using the 4Geeks boilerplate, once you have that, make sure to fork the repository into your account. Click Create Fork, and then you will have it on your GitHub account, and then you can use the code spaces at that point. At this point here, we're going to go ahead and click Code. And we're going to go ahead and create code spaces on main. Before you do that, for my the students who are part of the academy, those who are graduates, just make sure it says 4Geeks Academy at the bottom, and go ahead and create the code space. It'll take a minute to go ahead and get started. For those that are just joining us, if you want, you can go ahead and open up an instance of VS Code locally on your computer. Or if you're a student of 4Geeks Academy, you can go ahead and use the HTML hello template that is available at 4Geeks. Okay. Open an instance using CodeSpace, are you referring to? Well, if you have it locally on your computer, for example, if you have VS Code, let's say at home, right? You can either do it on the terminal or you can look it up um, on your applications. So on the terminal, it would be code space period on whichever directory you are at. That will open up an instance of VS Code locally. Right? But this is a local instance. This is on my computer. I'm using code spaces, and that would be cloud-based. Okay. You can also just go, if you're using Windows, you would go onto the Start button and then find VS Code there. Or if you already have a Start tile for VS Code, you can just click that and open it from there. Okay, perfect. I'm going to go ahead and close this preview here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete everything here. I want a completely empty repository here. So I'm going to just go ahead and select everything in here, and I'm just going to delete everything from here. We're going to start with a clean slate. Let me slide this over to the side here. That'll help me out. There we go. And let me move this in a bit. Perfect. All right, cool. Awesome. I'm glad you found it easy to set up. All right, so a couple of things before we go ahead and start. Let's make sure that we have npm run in our VS Code. You would have to have Node and npm available in order to use the tools that we're going to be using tonight. So that just make sure that you have a certain Node version and an npm version as well, because you're going to be using both that to go ahead and install certain npm applications. And let me know if the text is a little bit too small. I will increase it in size as needed. Uh, 16 should be fine. You're welcome. All right, so once we have checked that we have a Node and npm version instance running on there, which is great, we're going to go ahead and use React plus Vite. So React plus Vite is the modern way of creating React apps. It used to be Create React App, but that has since been deprecated. So we're going to go ahead and, if you want, you can, I have it already up here, but if you want, you can Google React and Vite on the search bar. And you want to find the one that says Vite.js on there, getting started. Once you're there, it's going to take you to the getting started page. This is going to have the initial commands that we're going to need in order to go ahead and get all the boilerplate that we need for creating our React app. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit here. And one of the things I want to use, you can use npm. I'm going to use pnpm, which is it's kind of like a different way of installing. And there's a reason why. I'm not going to get into the specifics of it today because that's outside the scope of what we're learning today. But if you want to use npm, what we're going to do is we're going to be using this. We're going to use one of these command lines here. Okay. So for me, I want to make sure that I have pnpm. So I'm going to check on mine real quick. And I have pnpm installed on mine. If you have pnpm installed on yours, you can use that as well. Let me go ahead and see if I can continue. There it goes. Okay, perfect. So we're going to use this command line if you're using pnpm. If you're using npm, you can use the, let me see here. If you're using npm 7, so you got to check which version of npm you have. It should be after 7 by now. So if you have 7 or later, you're going to be using the second line here. Okay. Now we're not going to be using Vue. We're going to be using React. So we're going to have to change a little bit of this command. So here, I'm going to use pnpm create Vite. Then I'm going to write the name of my my directory, my main directory, and then I'm going to use the template option here, and then put React here instead of Vue. And you'll notice that there are many different templates that are available with Create Vite. You can do things with React, React with TypeScript, Svelte, Vue, Vanilla.js, and lots of other options there. So it provides many different ways of creating your front-end technology, whatever application, excuse me, that you want to build. All right, once you have that, just hit enter. And it's going to head and create a directory. I created mine called simple-counter. And if you expand on that, you'll see that everything has been built in already. And then it gives you the commands on how to get the application running on another tab or a window. So I'm going to cd or change directory into the simple-counter directory. Then I'm going to file the second command, which is pnpm install.
Ricardo, excuse me, there is a question.
Okay. Thank you, Jeneth. Let me see here. If you're using npm, Donald, if you're using npm 3 and Node version 6, you might want to, in the future, make sure to get later versions for up to, if you have npm 3, you're going to be using, I don't even think that you'll be able to use that with Node version 6 and npm 3. I think those versions are a bit too old for that, so you have to update them. Yes, that would be the second one here, right? Where it says My View App, just change it to simple-counter. So this is the name of your directory right here. Alex said, what is the command? Which command are you referring to, Alex? Correct. Depending on your version, yes. If your version of npm is 7.0 or later, then yes, that would be the correct one. But instead of My View App or View, My View App, you change it to simple-counter, and the template will be React. This is just an example, obviously. Now, once you've gone ahead and you've done the installation of your node modules, if you're running npm, it should be npm run start. If you're using pnpm, it's pnpm run dev. Alec, you would need to use React. We're using React, not Vue. Now, once you have your the run command, you should get some address, some local address here. You can follow the link by holding down the control button and clicking that. If you get a pop-up window that says open in the browser, you can use that as well. Both will work. At which point you should see this on the screen here. If you've seen that, then you successfully completed that. We use just React. It should just say React. I'm not sure. Yeah, at which point with this command here, it should have just been this one right here that we were going to use, which is React. So in your instance, you should have something like this. Hold on, let me pull it up real quick here. Here we go. So you would use the second one there. You would have npm create byte at the latest, right? Simple counter, template React. And I hope that helps. I'll keep it on the side. I'm going to go ahead actually and copy and paste it in the text messages if you need that. All right, cool. Now that we have that, you can close the getting started with Vite, because really we're going to be focusing on our application and the code part of it. So at this point here, we don't want to touch this current terminal because the current terminal is running. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up another instance of the terminal by clicking our plus sign here. So I now have another bash terminal running. And this is where if I need to install any other NPM packages, I can go ahead and do that down the road, which there will be at least one more that we're going to have to install. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here. In our source folder, you'll notice that we have a few files in here. We have app.css, app.jsx, index.css, and main.jsx. All right, so we're going to be doing some cleaning up here before we go ahead and start writing some code in. So starting with app.css, we're going to remove everything from there. You can delete everything in app.css. In app.jsx, we're going to, let me see here. We're going to delete everything in the top for now. We're going to delete this use state line right now. And then I'm going to delete everything inside these empty tags. So in other words, I want something clean like this, which we will be using to populate shortly. All right, so again, app.css, you can empty it out. There should not be any stylings in there. And app.jsx, I just want the template by itself with no imports, no JSX code at all, just the function itself and the export command or the keyword. In index.css, excellent, Alec. You're welcome. In index.css, we're going to clean this also. You can wipe that one out. And you can close this one. We're not going to be using this one. So just delete index.css stylings and then just and close it out. So finally, main.jsx, we have this is where we are creating the connection between our HTML file and our root component to go ahead and render it onto the browser. We're going to leave this alone for now. So one more time, app.css, emptied out. App.jsx, just the empty function component with nothing in it right now. Index.css is emptied out as well. So I have absolutely zero stylings right now. And main.jsx, we leave alone for right now. You can leave it as is. So my React plus Vite should be just a blank screen right now, as it should be. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close out my styling for right now because I'm not going to be using those. I'm really going to be focusing on my JSX files. Now, our counter, right? We want our counter to end up starting with just like a regular timer, right? So it should be going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth, right? And if I have an opportunity to pull this up, let me see real quick here. Pull it up real quick here. We want something that looks like this. So here's one that's completed. It's going to look similar to this. We're not going to have as many place values on here. I'm only going to go up to the thousands tonight just to keep things short and sweet. But if you want to add more place values to that, you're more than welcome to after we're finished with tonight's presentation. But you notice that we have basically a white background, right? We have the banner here. It's basically kind of like a banner with a time symbol and different place values, and then everything is counting up as it should. So let's go ahead and try to do that on our own. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new JSX file called simple counter itself. That functional component is going to be holding the template for what we're seeing on the browser. Right. So this is we want to see this. This will be created by our simple counter component. So let's go ahead and give that a shot. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead into our source directory here. I'm going to right click and I'm going to put new file. And I'm going to type it as a simple counter.jsx. Being mindful of the capitalizations, it should be written as the app.jsx, where it is the first letter of our file name should be capitalized. I'm also going to create a simple counter stylings file. So I'm going to go into source and I'm also going to put new file here. And I'm going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to write it exactly the same way as my JSX file, but instead it's going to be .css. Okay. I'm then going to go ahead and go back into my app.jsx file because I'm going to copy this template here. And I'm going to paste it in simple counter because I'm going to need this exact template for my simple counter JSX file. So I copied everything. And I'm going to go into simple counter here and I'm going to paste it. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to change the name from app to simple counter. Okay. That's in here. So in order to test to see that simple counter is being presented on the browser, I'm just going to do a quick little heading here, just to make sure everything is connected. So in simple counter, I'm just adding an H1 element here, and it says hello simple counter. And now that I have it exported, it's going to allow my app.jsx file to import it and use that custom tag. So I'm going to go into app.jsx. And right at the beginning of line 1, I'm just going to hit enter a few times here because I need some space up there. And I'm going to import simple counter. And you'll see the first line has the directory shown there. So I'm going to just finish that up like that. Now it's grayed out because it's not being used yet. Notice that it's declared, but its value is never read. But that's going to change right now. I'm going to go into my app component, and in the JSX, I'm going to go ahead and type simple counter on here. And if everything goes well, if I go into React Invite, I see hello simple counter on there. So everything is connected and it's showing properly on the screen. Any questions so far? Does everyone have hello simple counter on their browser? If you don't, let me know. All right, Alec, let me see yours real quick. If you give me a chance to share your screen, I can take a quick look at it and see what's going on. Okay, you're in main.jsx. Your main.jsx should not be touched. I'm in app.jsx. So hold on, don't do anything yet. Don't do anything. Don't do anything. So what I want you to do is type Control Z. Just press Control Z until you get to the beginning of what you were doing there. Control Z. Control and Z. Hold down the control button. No, not that one. It's Control and Z. Okay, there you go. Okay. Now close main.jsx because you don't need to use that one. Close that tab. You are in simple counter. Pause there for a minute. Okay. Simple counter, you have to put an export on there. So go to app.jsx. Do Control A, copy everything. Nope. Or just, hit default. Yeah. You can highlight everything with your mouse if you'd like. Yeah. Copy. There you go. That would probably be easier. Yes. Go to simplecounter.jsx now. No, not main. Close main. You don't need to touch main. Simple counter. Delete everything in there. And then paste what you, perfect. Now just change app to simple counter. There you go. I'm going to go back to presenting on my screen. Okay. All right. So now at this point here, we have everything connected. We're going to go ahead and start working on simple counter. So I'm going to go ahead and just remove this H1 tag here, element, excuse me, as we're going to go ahead and start typing stuff in here. So let me move this aside here. All right. So for our simple counter, we're going to first start with just hard coding everything. I want to be able to see that I have a clock and zeros on there, right? It doesn't have to be with all this fancy stylings or anything like that. I just want to see a simple clock with a bunch of zeros on there. So let's go ahead and start with that. And then we'll go ahead and do a little styling as we move on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a parent div called counter display. So I'm going to do div dot counter display. And in here is going to have all my my children divs, which will be the clock itself, the image of the clock itself, and the different place value of our seconds, right? So my first div, all these divs that I'm going to create right now inside counter display, they will all be siblings. Okay? There will not be any children. So my first div will be the clock image itself. Okay? And then the next siblings or set of siblings are my seconds. So here I'm going to do div dot seconds. Let's see, dot thousands. And then I'm going to have div dot seconds dot hundreds. Seconds dot tens. And then div dot seconds ones. You can see they're all siblings to one another. There's no children within there. Okay. All right. All right. So for my thousands, my hundreds, my tens, and my ones, I'm just going to hard code zeros in there for now. You can put different numbers if you want. It's totally up to you. So if you take a look here, you should start seeing some output on your browser. Now, this will eventually change into something more dynamic, but we'll get to that in a minute. Now, in my clock image, this is where we're going to go and find some sort of image in order to have that little analog clock looking thing here. So I'm going to go ahead and expand on my clock image element so that I can add some sort of child in there that would be the actual image. So I'm going to open up Bootstrap. You can use in some other icon if you'd like. So I'm going to do Bootstrap icons. There are other ones like hero icons and so forth that are available. Use the one that you see fit. If you want to use Font Awesome, you can use that as well. But the great thing about Bootstrap icons is if I can go into clock, I can find the one that I want here. Generally speaking, I'm gonna use this one here just to because of its simplicity. But you can use whichever one you want. Once you click it, you're gonna have some different options on how to use it. And the one I want to use is the SVG element. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this SVG element here at the bottom corner. And I'm going to go right back to simple counter and paste it nested inside the clock image div. I'm going to paste it in there. The way it's set up, you're going to have to adjust it a little bit, which is fine. So I'm going to nest this again real quick here, just so it's easier to read. There we go. So now if I take a look at my output, you should see a little clock on there right now. So if you got that, great. Because now we can go ahead and do a little bit of the styling. Generally speaking, you have decisions to make whether you want to work on the logic or work a little bit on the stylings. Since this is a very simple project, I'm going to work on the style part first to make it look as close to the original as possible, and then I'll do the logic. But it is something that you'll have to decide as you go along in your projects. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and move this to the side now, and I'm going to put the browser on a separate part of my screen here, because I want to go ahead and see the changes that I'm making now as I'm doing the styling. So remember, the goal here is to try to get it as close to this as possible. We want to try to practice getting to something that we've already seen. All right, so I'm going to open up simplecounter.css because this is where we're going to use it. Now, in order to see the stylings for our on the browser or on the output here, I have to make sure that I import that style folder somewhere, right? Because if I don't, then you'll never see it. You'll never see any changes that are being made. So the place to put the stylings on here is in, or I'm going to put it in main.jsx. If you go into main.jsx real quick, you're going to see that index.css is there. And I'm going to import the simplecounter.css as well. So in main.jsx, I'm going to go to the end of line 4, and I'm going to import simplecounter.css. And with that import, it's going to allow me to see changes as I make my updates. Once that's imported, you can go ahead back into your stylings, simplecounter.css stylings file. And we can go ahead and start getting this to look like what we want. So recall that we have some class names on here. Yes. We have a counter display, we have clock image, and we have our seconds here. Oh, and one more thing before I go ahead and move on. One of the drawbacks to using the icons from Bootstrap, if you pay close attention to the SVG tag, if you go across, you'll notice that the clock also has class names on here. But we have to change this. So where the SVG element is at, where you find class, add the word name to it, please. So it will conform to with React and not complain. Okay. So now that we have that as class name, you always have to pay attention to that sometimes, because sometimes when you're pasting things in from other resources, you have to be wary of that, right? They will have it as generic as possible, so you will have to modify it as needed. So now that we got that, because we're going to be using the counter display class name, we're going to be using the by clock class name, and we're also going to be doing something with all the child divs in here. We're going to be working with them as well as one group. So it's not a lot of styling that needs to be done, but there is some. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start working with the counter display, which is the main div. So remember, when you're working with classes, you have to start with a period. So I'm going to do counter display. And this is where I'm going to center everything. So I have my selector there. And I'm going to use a text align center. By the way, if you feel more comfortable using Bootstrap or some other application for your stylings, you're more than welcome to do so. Okay. I'm going to keep it with CSS because this doesn't require a lot of stylings. And it's good to practice CSS as well. I also want to push it down a little bit from the top. I don't want it, all the way at the top of my page. So I'm going to give it some margin. I'm going to give it a top and bottom of 100 pixels and a left and right of 0 pixels. Or just 0. Actually, I'll just do 0. Now it's pushed down from the top a little bit, and it's centered. The next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and work on all the children. So I'm going to do counter display again. But this time I'm going to refer to all the div children inside of it. So here I want to display as an inline block. So now it went from being vertical to being horizontal. Let's increase its font size. We'll do 100 pixels. Let's give it a background of black. And let's give it the font color of white, so it's reversed. And I want to give each div a little bit of some width, a little bit of space. So I'm going to do a width of, let's say, like 80 pixels maybe. That looks good. The last thing I want to adjust is the clock itself. Here I'll do the class by clock. And we'll give it a width and a height. Do maybe like 50 pixels maybe. And a height of 50 pixels as well. That's a little bit small. I might want to make it a little bit bigger. Let's do 60 and 60. It's a little bit better. So yeah, not a lot of stylings were needed for this. And we have it looking pretty consistent. The font style is a little bit different, or the font family is a little bit different, but I'm fine with that. Other than that, everything is looking pretty sharp. We got what we need, so we can go ahead and start working on some logic now. All right, at this point here, we're going to go ahead and let me close my main counter here. My simple counter stylings, I don't need them anymore. Now I'm just going to be working on app.jsx and simplecounter.jsx. All right, Now, before I get into that, let me go ahead and give you a little bit of a review of what we're going to be talking about for those of you that may be new to React. Okay. As you remember, in the beginning of the presentation, I was talking how these are what we call functional components. Okay. You can think of these functional components as like building blocks in your web application. Think of it as like a specific type of Lego brick. Let's say like a 3 long, red Lego brick, right? That you have many of those bricks, right? And you can use those bricks over and over and over again to build whatever creation you want. Okay, so think of functional components kind of like those Lego bricks. The app Lego brick does a certain thing, right? And you can have as many, you may have as many of those as you need. The simple counter is its own Lego brick. It's a little bit different, but it's still a Lego brick. Okay, you can work with them and make your website look the way you want it to, or the way you want your users to use. Okay, so the functional component has two main parts. All right, the functional component is going to have an input part, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, which is called props. Props are kind of like instructions, and we're going to use, in this instance, we're going to be using seconds as the props or the properties that we're going to need in order to make the timer on our counter tick in consecutive order. The second part is the output of our functional component. That's what the component actually looks like when it's put together according to our instructions. Right? Now, these functional components that we're building here, like app and simple counter, right? They help keep our code organized and easy to manage, or as easy as we can try to manage it, right? What it does is that it encourages us to break down our web application into smaller, more manageable pieces that you can work on separately. And what's great about it is that if the website is not looking the way it needs to look, you don't have to change all the code. All you have to do is just change something in a particular component, and it will update that part of that component to reflect on the entire browser, or as many other pages as you need to. So that's what's great about functional components. You can think of them as templates, and you can update them and change them as needed. All right. So what we're going to start with here right now is by going into our app.jsx. And what we need to do now is be able to change our numbers here. We can't change anything right now because this is static. So if I went to simple counter and I change it to 1, I mean, I can manually change it if I wanted to, but that's not going to be practical, right? That's not what we wanted to do. We wanted to count on its own. So there's a couple of things that we're going to be focusing on here. A couple of things that we're going to be focusing on here is using useState. We're going to be using useEffect. We're going to be using setInterval as well. We're going to be focusing on props as well. And how to use these different ideas, a different code in order to build something with it. Okay, so we're going to be using all these different parts or these different JavaScript and React technologies in order to get our counter going on its own. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to focus on useState. useState is pretty straightforward. useState allows us to have some data that we can have in our component, and we can update it, and we can use it to display on our browser. Okay, and straightforward enough. We're going to use useState to hold our counter. So what we're going to do is right at the beginning of line 2, I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to import useState. In order to use it, we have to import it. So we're going to import useState from React, like so. So useState is where we're going to be holding on and updating our counter. right? So you can think of use state as like a small memory space. Um, think of like a whiteboard, right? You have a whiteboard, and that whiteboard is constantly being updated with new information, right? Teachers or whoever it is will write on that whiteboard, right? Provide data for that moment or whenever, for that period of time that it's necessary. But then when you're done with the whiteboard, right, you can clear it out and put new information on there, right? So that is what use state is. It's basically a location where we can hold some sort of information in our functional component. So in order to use state, we've imported already, and we're going to apply it inside of our functional component. So right at the end of line 6 where it says function app, right at the end of our curly brace here, I'm going to hit enter. And I'm going to go ahead and create a use state instance here. So we use the keyword const, and we use brackets. And within our brackets, we're going to have two things. We're going to have the actual variable that's going to be changing. In this case, we'll call it counter. And then we're going to have some sort of function that will allow us to make changes to our variable counter. And usually, well, almost always, it has the keyword or has the word set in front of it to differentiate it. So we have counter as the variable and set counter as the function itself. Then we will put the equal or the assignment operator on there. We're going to use useState. And then we're going to put in a pair of parentheses on there. Now, it's usually good to initialize our variable. Since our counter is going to be a number, what we're going to do is inside the parentheses, we'll start it at 0. Okay. So now I can go into my return statement here, and if I want to, I can use curly braces and put counter on there. And if you type that in there, you'll notice that a little 0 will pop up on your browser. That's the actual counter variable being shown. And if I change its initial state to, let's say, 100, then it will update to 100 as well. So notice that our counter now is what we're going to be using to start and update on a regular basis. I'm going to get rid of this here just to show you that it worked. Okay. And remember, use state is just to help us remember things. It allows our functional component to remember necessary information, right? It's great for keeping track of counting things like we're doing right now, right? Usually with React, you'll have like buttons. You can keep track of how many times you clicked something, right? Or how much text you're writing, right? You can write an app where you are you're writing an essay or something like that. It'll tell you how many characters are left or available, or how many characters you've already written. Those are all different ways of using use state. Now, we're going to need to have our counter be able to increment, right? Constantly, like every second. It goes from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, right? So in order to do that, right, we need to use these two tools here together. Use effect and set interval. Okay, set interval, excuse me, set interval, you can think of it kind of like an alarm clock. You can set it to accomplish something at a certain time. Let's say ring a bell, let's say, and then when it rings, you know to do something. Or you can have it just keeping track of time. You can use it to keep track of time. Okay? So set interval is useful for doing things repeatedly, like updating time on your web page every second, which is what we're going to use. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to use set interval inside our use effect. Okay. So what is use effect? Use effect is kind of like a helper to our functional component. All right. So let's say, for example, you have someone helping you as you build, let's say, some Lego construction, right? Like with your Lego bricks, right? And when something changes in your construction, your helper will tell you when that change or what change has occurred, right? So it's like having a friend with you who notices when you're rearranging, let's say, your bricks, and then it tells you if there's anything that needs to be fixed. Okay. And what this does is that it helps you to do important things like update your page. So use effect is very helpful with that. As far as when something changes, it also allows you to fetch information from the internet and allow you to show it on the web page. I know one of our other applications that we use, we go out and use, we fetch what we call URLs or APIs, right? To fetch, let's say, like Star Wars data so that we can present Star Wars data on our applications. Right? So we use effect for those types of things, for counting or for retrieving things from the internet. All right, that's what use effect is for. So in order to use effect, what we're going to do is we're going to call it. So we're going to have, or we're going to declare it. So we have use effect here. Let me go back here real quick. And I'm just going to put a couple of parentheses. Now, everything is going to happen inside of these parentheses. Now, use effect has a reputation of being a little bit confusing when you start working with it for the first time. Right? It has that reputation, and it's something where you get better with it with practice. All right. So what we're going to do inside use effect is we're going to use set interval in there to constantly update our counter here. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to create a function inside of this. And the way you do that is inside these parentheses, we're going to create another set of parentheses, make an arrow, and create braces inside of it. So inside use effect here, I'm going to use set interval. And by doing that, by setting or by using set interval inside my use effect, okay, what basically I'm doing is I'm going to be setting an alarm that every second something is going to change. Okay. So by putting set interval in here, it's going to allow me to every second that ticks, I'll be able to update my counter by using set counter inside of this. So this is how you do this. Go in between your braces and hit enter. All right, and we're going to work inside of our braces here. All right. So I'm going to declare a variable called const interval. Like so. And then on the other side of my assignment operator, I'm going to call set interval like this. Now, whatever happens inside of these sets of parentheses is going to happen after every certain amount of seconds. Okay. So set interval, we call that a function, just like use effect or use state. So this function, set interval, is going to take two different parts to it, two different what we call arguments, right? The first part is another function, which we're going to do we're going to do something inside of that, comma, and then we put how much time we want set interval to wait before repeating whatever is inside of our function here. So let's say we want to do something every second inside of our curly braces here, then we declare 1000. Set interval works off of milliseconds, so 1000 milliseconds is 1000. So basically what this is saying here is that for every second, I want something to happen inside of my function argument in my set interval. Does anyone know what we want to do inside set interval here? Because I mentioned it already. What do we want to do every second? It has to do with line 7. Change the counter is correct. Update the counter. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to use set counter on there. So I'm going to do set counter. Okay. And that is a function as well. Remember, functions are going to have those parentheses. And inside my set counter, I want to update the counter. The way you do that is you write counter or variable counter, write the arrow symbol, and then we do counter +1. Don't worry if you don't see anything on the screen yet. That's fine. Now, this whole set of instructions here, lines 10 through 12, okay, we call that component mounting. Okay? We are mounting or putting it into our browser. So every second we're updating our counter. So this is going to run every second. It may work, it may not work, but we're going to find out in a minute. Okay, so we can go ahead and test. If you go into your browser portion right here, your output, if you go into your developer tools, if I go into my console here, I'm going to move this to the bottom. Okay. Yes, there's going to be errors being shown here. You don't have to worry about that right now. Okay, we're going to fix that in a minute. Okay. Now, as we're working on use effect, one of the things that we have to make sure that we do is import it. So let's go ahead and do that as well. We have use state up here in line 2. Right after use state, add use effect. We have to add that on there. And once you do that, you'll see that the timer pops up again. And it should get rid of all the errors on your console. So let's test and see how this looks. What I can do is I can console.log our counter. And you'll notice that it's going bonkers right now. Okay. And the reason for that is because we're missing a critical part of our use effect. Okay. The first thing I want to do is I want to go into right in between my my curly brace and my parentheses here. And I'm going to add a comma here and then an empty bracket there. Okay. And if you do that, then you'll notice that you'll get a pair of zeros, but it will not continue counting anymore. Okay. This little thing right here, this pair of brackets right here, okay, we have use effect has 2 arguments here. This is the first argument right here, right? This is the first part of my function, which is the function itself, which I'm using set interval. And then it has a second argument here. This little thing right here is called a dependency array. And this dependency array is, for many people, the bane of their existence. All right, and it's one of those things that some people, have problems with understanding. what is the dependency array? How does it work? All right. But you can think of a dependency array kind of like a checklist that you give to your friend, let's say, as you're building your Lego bricks. And it tells them exactly what to pay attention to. Okay. So anything inside this dependency array, any variable or anything, if any of those variables change, then your friend will step in and make an update, right? Or let you know, right? So think of this as basically saying, if there's any change that occurs, let's say if my counter is in here, right? If the variable counter is changing, right? You'll notice now that it's counting more or less accurately, right? It's still not perfect, right? But notice now that the counter is changing. So if I get this out, this is saying only show this one time. You see how it stopped? This is saying only run this function here once and only once. Okay. If I do not have this, this is just going to continue updating without stopping. And this is where you want to make sure that when you use effect, you always start with having what we call an empty dependency array, and then making changes as needed. Because if you forget, then you end up with that output popping up and just acting very strange. Okay? So that's why I have console.log in here, just to see how it's showing on my screen. Okay. So if there is no dependency array, right? If no dependency array, right? If there's no dependency array, meaning no bracket, meaning this is not present, right? If that's not there, basically saying is just constantly change, constantly update as needed, right? Constantly update as needed. If I have an empty dependency array, which is this one right here, that's an empty dependency array. So an empty dependency array means you only run it one time, but it doesn't come back to check anything. So this just means run once. And you'll notice all these times are popping up. These are all updating because every time I type something in here, it's running one time. So if I type another letter in here, it's going to show another number, but only one time. So it only runs once. If I have some sort of state in here, like counter, right? So if I have an array with a state variable inside of it, so let's say I type the word counter inside there, right? It will only update when state changes. So since counter is not in here, it's only going to run one time. If I put counter in there, counter is going to constantly be updated. Why? Because I'm changing it every second in here. And since I'm changing it every second, use effect will run again. Now, the reason why it's acting so silly right now, right? Instead of running in a controlled manner, is because I need to unmount my component. So every time I run a second, I want to mount it onto my browser, and then I want to unmount it and then update it by remounting it onto my browser again. Okay, so it's going to be a constant putting it on, taking it out, putting it on, taking it out. Right now, I'm just putting on. And that's why it's running very crazy. So in order to unmount, I'm going to go to the end of line 14 here. And I'm going to do a component unmount, right, which is to remove it, right? I'm going to use what's a return statement in here. So the return statement within this useEffect function is basically like a cleanup. And it's responsible for undoing or cleaning up any of the effects that were set up when the component was rendered initially with that current render of useEffect. So basically what I'm doing is I'm making React invoke some sort of cleanup function, which is the return, and before performing a removal. And this ensures that any resources or actions associated with the effect are properly cleaned up to prevent unexpected behavior. That's what's happening right now with all these crazy numbers running around. I'm getting this unexpected behavior. So I'm going to use this return statement, and I'm going to create an anonymous function here, and I'm going to use clear interval. In clear interval, I'm going to use this variable right here, interval. That's why I used this. That's why I declared the interval variable. What that's going to do is that's going to think of it's kind of like clearing it up so that it's ready to receive the next second. Okay. At this point here, if I restart everything, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just restart everything here. Okay. I have it at 0, 0, but I'm going to put counter inside here because counter is what I want to update. I'm going to put counter on here, and you'll notice now that it's moving at a very nice pace. That is what I want. So now that I have my counter being shown on the console in a nice, organized manner, now I can go back into my JSX code, and I can go ahead and utilize this information onto my actual JSX code here, right, in simple counter and here, right, to display this information on the actual counter itself. Okay. So just to show you real quick, if I go into my return statement here for my component and I put counter in here, you'll see now that it should be updating in a neat and organized way. So I'll refresh it real quick, and you'll notice that it starts at 0 and it counts up just like it's supposed to. All right. So now let's get this counting into our simple counter itself. So I've talked about use state, I've talked about use effect, and I've talked about set interval. The next thing I'm going to talk about is props. I'm going to close this for now because I don't need it. Because since it's displaying correctly, now I'm going to be focusing on getting this rendered onto the actual screen, onto the browser itself. All right. What I want to do is I want to get my counter now that I have it set up, and I want to apply it to my simple counter custom tag. Now, in order to accomplish this, right, I can put counter in here as an attribute, but it's not going to be that simple. I'm going to need to use props in order to pass this information from my parent functional component, which is app, right, to a child component, in this case, simple counter. Simple counter is a child component to app. App as it's the parent. So I want to go from app to simple counter. In order to do that, I got to put counter inside of this custom tag here. Okay. So to do that, let's go ahead and put on here, let's say seconds. Okay. And I'm going to use that as an attribute. Just like any HTML tag, you have attributes. Well, these right here, you can consider them like attributes for a custom tag, and it has a specific name. Right now, I have it called seconds. Eventually, we're going to make this a little bit more refined. Now, inside here, I'm going to put counter in here. Okay. So now I have, what I'm doing here is I'm passing my counter state variable here into my simple counter as a prop. And now I can go into my simple counter here, into my simple counter app, and right on the top line here where it says function simple counter, I'm just going to head and write props in here. Because now simple counter does have a prop. It's called seconds. So the way you apply this props, right, is you go into your child component, in this case, simple counter, and you go into the JSX. And let's say I want to utilize my counter now inside one of my HTML or JSX elements here. I'm going to go into, let's say, the ones div element, and I'm going to get rid of the 0. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a pair of braces inside. And in here, I'm going to put props.seconds. And now you see that it's being displayed on here. It's not done correctly, but we're going to fix that in a minute. You can see that it's starting to count in a nice and neat fashion here. Now, this is all good and all, but once I reach 10, watch what happens. Notice that it's still stuck in the div element for the ones place of my seconds. I don't want to do that. I can go ahead and put prop seconds in here for every single one of these, but it's just going to repeat the same exact numbers that are being done here in each of my places. So what I have to do is figure out a way to break apart my counter so that I'm working with ones, tens, hundreds, and thousands separately. Okay. So in order to do that, I'm going to start creating some props for each of these elements. So in order for me to accomplish that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create their place values here. So I'm going to have each of these have props. Since this is the ones place, I'm going to have props for the ones digit, right? For the second one, I'm going to have props for the tens digit. Next, I'm going to have props for the hundreds digit. And finally, I'm going to have props for the thousands digit. And that's not going to work because I don't have it in braces to be spelled correctly. Now you'll see that the digits have disappeared, and that's fine because that's because I do not have these names as attributes in my simple counter custom tag. But as soon as I put these 4 different names as the attributes, you'll start seeing the numbers pop up again. So I have ones digit, tens digit, hundreds digit, and thousands digit. I'm going to use those words here in my simple counter. So I'm going to get rid of this seconds now. I'm going to apply each of those in the custom tag. So here I'm going to have let's see here. We want to make sure that we put, this is the thousands first. So the thousands should go first here. So this is the thousands digit. And I mean, right now, if you want to set it equal to counter, you're more than welcome to. Okay. And then we will have the hundreds digit. That will be counter as well. Then we have the tens digit. We'll set that to counter as well. And then we're going to have the ones digit, which is set to counter as well. And you'll notice that everything is getting repeated here, which is fine, because we're going to fix that. Let me refresh everything. Let's see, ones digit is not showing, so let me make sure that I have it written correctly. Ones digit. Let me make sure I have that correctly. It might be that it's just not, there's not enough space. Oh, there it is, ones digit. There we go. I had it as plural and it should be singular. Okay, we're getting somewhere now. Everything is counting up in a nice, neat fashion, but not the way I expect it to. So we're going to have to do something with this counter to allow us to break apart each of those place values, right? Where the ones digit is only counting as a ones, right? The tens digit is counting as a tens, but it will look like a ones, right? And so forth down the line. So I need to break apart each of these digits. Like, for example, let's say I had like 59, right? If I had like, let me go to here, right? Let's say I had the value 625, right? What I want to do is get that number, 625, and I want to extract out of that a 600, a 20, and a 5. But I don't want to just extract it like that. I want to extract it even more, where I just have a 6, a 2, and a 5. And I put each of those digits in their right location. So this is going to require a little bit of math in order for us to break apart that number. Okay, so let's take a look here. How can we do this? We can apply a function. We can have a function, and we can call that, let's say, calculate seconds, right? And it's going to need that on there. There we go. So calculate seconds is going to need a couple of things. I'm going to need to know, going back into our, I'm going to need to know the counter itself, right? What the counter is currently at. So that's one of the parameters that I'm going to need. So I know that I need the counter. So we'll put here a counter. And I want to know the place value that I want to work on. So I need to give it some place value, either ones, tens, hundreds, or thousands, right? So that I can do some calculation with the counter and get just that specific digit in the correct place. So I'm going to need place value on here. So let's say we do something like, for example, let's say I had 625. and I want to get the 600, right? So 625, let's say at that instance, is the counter. And I want to divide it because I only want to get the hundreds from there, right? So if I do divide by 100, right, I get 6 and 2500s, right? But I don't want this part. I don't want the decimal, and I don't want the anything that is part of a whole, right? All I'm interested in is the 6, right? So we have a JavaScript function that will allow us to just grab the 6 itself, and that's math.floor. So if I do the division, right, what I can do is I can get the 6 here, use math.floor, and get rid of the decimal portion. I can do 625, right? And I can also, I want to get the tens as well. So I can probably divide by tens here, right? If I divide by 10, I'm going to get 62.5. If I do math.floor, that'll get rid of that. But here, the problem with this is that I want the 2 only. So here I'm going to need to add another little calculation in here. I'm going to do division, right? Because that's going to help me get my the digit that I want in the ones place, right? Either the 6, the 2, or the 5. I'm going to use math.floor to get rid of the decimal portion. And then I'm going to use the modulus operator, a modulo operator. And I'm going to do mod 10, because that's going to just get me the remainder. If I do 62 divided by 10, right, that would be 6 remainder 2. Yes? And that will give me the remainder only, which is the 2, which is what I want. So I can do 6 mod 10, and that will give me the remainder only, which would give me the 2. So let's do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to return let's do a counter divided by place value. Just like that. Okay. So let's see here. If I do that for, I don't know if I'm going to be able to use a function in there. I don't think that's going to work. I can do, yes, I can do, I'm going to add a little variable in here for right now. Because what I want to do is I want to get I want to test out the number on the side. So if I do, let's see here, const number is going to give me, I'm going to do function, calculate seconds. Let's see here. I want to do division here. So if I do, no, actually, you know what? Let me not do that. Let me do it with a calculator. That would be easier. No, I have to divide. So if I have 625 divided by, let's say, 10 or 100, let's say. Let me get my calculator again. Let me pull that sucker up. There we go. So 625 divided by 100 will give me the 6. I know that would work. So I need to do math.floor here for sure. Math.floor will give me just the 6 there, which is what I want. So if I do calculate seconds, like that, right? And apply it to every attribute in my JSX code here and use that function. Now I put the counter. So let's say I do counter in here, right? Since this is the ones digit, I just divide by 1. Let me restart it again real quick here. So I got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, that's fine. So now now that it's still giving me ones, right? So 16 ones, 17 ones. I got to do modulo 10 here. Now when I do that, I'm going to restart it. It should restart to 1 again, or start to 0 instead of 10. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 0 again. So that's exactly what I want. So I can use this function now, and I can do a counter for my second one here, but this one I want to divide by 10. So I'll do 10s there. And for this one, since it's the hundreds digit, I'll do counter, and I want to divide it by 100. And then I want to do counter again, and I want to divide it by 1,000. Boom, look, the 37, see the 3 10s? So the clock is actually ticking at 42, 43, but only the digits are in their place, which is exactly what I needed here. So this little function here does all the math for me so that I can put each digit in its correct place value. So let me restart it again. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, so that means that it's going to do it for all of them. Okay, perfect. We have all our props. We have the function in the right place. There's a couple of things left that we have to do to conclude here. First thing is with our props. In our simple counter props, I want to make sure that I'm providing some sort of data type for my props so that if there's something else that is used as a prop or passed as a prop to simple counter, like a string or a Boolean, right? That it should throw some sort of error. So in order to do that, we're going to use prop types. So I'm going to open up a new tab, and I'm going to look up prop types here. NPM. And prop types, NPM should bring up the prop types package. So click that. It's going to take you here. It's almost at 100. It should give me a 1 in the hundreds digit here in a second. Let's see, 97, 98, 99. There you go. So this is going to work properly for the remainder of the app. So we want to go ahead and we want to install prop types here. So you can just copy this. Go into your terminal, into your bash terminal. Not the one that's running, but the one that says bash. And we're going to install prop types. I'm using pnpm. If you're using npm, just copy and paste it and then run it. So now I have prop types installed. And now what I want to do is I want to use prop types in my simple counter functional component, because I want to make sure that everything that gets passed in here is a number type. So in order to do that, I'm going to go to the beginning of my function component here. Go to the top here. And I'm going to import prop types from so. And once I've imported that, I'm going to go to just above my export command here. And inside here, between my functional component and my export, which should be at the end there. There we go. That's better. What we're going to do is we're going to type the name of the functional component, which is simple counter. One. And you do dot prop types. And then we're going to assign it an empty set of braces as an object, basically. Now remember, we have the thousands digit, the hundreds digit, the tens digit, and the ones digit. We need to incorporate those in our prop types so that we can assign it a specific data type. So I'm going to go in between my braces. And in here, I'm going to put a thousands digit. Here it is. Put a colon, and then prop types dot number. Comma, and then you're going to repeat it for hundreds, tens, and ones. And that takes care of our data typing for our simple counter component. So everything's been passed to simple counter through props. We've utilized the attributes in the simple counter custom tag, and we've applied them here in our simple counter JSX code. We've given them the proper type, data type that they need, and we've gone ahead and styled simple counter. So simple counter is finished. All that's left now is just to clean up app.jsx a little bit here. So with app.jsx here, really the main thing that I want to clean up here is this function. This function calculates seconds. I can use it for other functional components, right? So just like a functional component can be used in different web applications, my functions themselves can be used in many different types of components themselves. So maybe my app.jsx is not the only one that's going to be utilizing this calculate seconds. Maybe I have another counter in another application that this function will be useful and utilized. So what I want to do here in this case is I want to go ahead and move this function and put it in a separate file, like what we call like a library. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my directories here. And in my source directory here, I'm going to right click and I'm going to create a new folder this time around. And this new folder, I'm going to call it, what are we going to call it? Just lib for library. Now that the lib directory or folder is created, in here I'm going to create a new file. And this file, I'm going to call it time.js. This will be a general time file full of, let's say, custom functions that I've created to help me with different time aspects, right? It's only going to have one function in here right now, but in the future, if you have other time functions that you want to utilize, you can put them in your own time.js folder or file, and then add that as a part of a library directory in your applications. So now here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my app.jsx file, and I'm going to copy. I'm going to cut this function here. So I'm going to cut it. You're going to notice that everything disappears, but that's okay. And I'm going to go into time.js, and I'm going to paste it here. Now, in order for this function to be utilized by other files, I have to export this. So I'm going to go ahead and use the export default keywords in front of my function keyword. And now that I have export default on there, I can use this anywhere I want. So now that I have that, I can close this. And now in my app.jsx file, instead of having the function in here, I'm just going to import it. So I'm going to put here, I'm going to remove this for a second because I want to show you how this works. Remove all of these. Just for a minute. You don't have to do it because we're going to use that calculate seconds name in a minute. Okay. So here, what I'm going to do is right underneath my import for simple counter, I'm going to import, and I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to give the name calculate seconds because that's the one that I'm using in my time .js file. So calculate seconds from, and I'm going to do period / and I'm going to go into lib / and then time. And now I've imported that function into my app.jsx file. I'm still getting an error here, but that's fine. Now I'm going to use this function name because that's the name of the function here, calculate seconds. So now that I've imported it, I can go back here and I can use the calculate seconds function now. I can do calculate seconds, counter 1000. Then I'm going to copy this. I'm going to do it for hundreds, tens, and finally ones. And so now I have a simple counter JSX file, right? I have the stylings. I've used simple counter in my app.jsx file as a custom tag. I've used props to pass my counter from the parent component, which is app, into my child component, which is simple counter. I'm using use state to keep track of my counter and increment it as needed. I'm using use effect to do the counting itself. And I'm calculating my seconds using my time.js file in my library folder. Again, organization matters here, right? The only thing that's left here to do before we conclude is to remove the counts here. Now, before I go ahead and do that, there's one thing I wanted to mention. If you take a look, you'll see that there's a 00 here, okay? That 00 is the effect of these 00s is being caused in main.jsx in what we call the strict mode tag. So what is strict mode, right? You could think of strict mode as like a safety net. And what it does is that it helps you catch mistakes while you're building. Okay. And what it does here specifically is that it gives me double outputs here initially. Right. So you would use strict mode when you're during your development mode to catch and fix bugs. before your website goes live. So think of it kind of like double checking before showing it to others. Right? And this allows you to find and fix problems early. So if you go into react.dev, here, it gives you more information about strict mode as well, right? And it tells you on here, enabling strict mode for the entire app, enabling strict mode for the part of the app, finding bugs. There was something I wanted to check here. Running effects with strict mode on. Hold on, where is it at? I think it's at the top then. You comment that all components in strict mode are checked if 2 teams are working on a project. Okay. So during development, strict mode would be useful. Wrapping your intent for if you use a framework called Create Root. Okay, yes. They help you find bugs that already exist in your code that can be tricky and reliable. Strict mode lets you fix bugs. So once you're done and you feel comfortable with your app, what you can do at this point is you can remove line 8 and 10 in your main.jsx file, and it will only render the 0 one time. Once you do that, it'll just show 0 one time and you're done. Okay. It doesn't really, it's not going to affect you in this instance if you leave it on there. It's an optional thing, but it's mostly for developmental purposes and for debugging. I've seen some people leave it on. I've seen some people take it off once they're ready for production. That is up to you. Okay. Now that we've got that out and strict mode is only showing this, now that the app is only showing 0 one time, I can close main.jsx. And inside my use effect, there's that console.log that's printing all these numbers. I want to get rid of that, so I'm going to get rid of line 15 here, the console.log counter, because I don't want to show it on there. I want my console clear. And now my counter is just showing on my browser. And congratulations, you are finished. Are there any questions? Well, on behalf of myself and 4Geeks Academy, I'd like to thank you for spending the time to coming out here and working on creating a little app. Now that you have your app, you can go ahead and upload it as a project for your repository or your portfolio. And if you ever have any questions, if you're not part of 4Geeks, again, you can reach out to the admissions team. Their number again is 786-416-6640. I'll go ahead and paste it again on the on the text section or the chat. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
You're welcome. What would you have to do to make it a countdown timer? Is that a simple change? I think that in my mind, I think the way that you would do that is that you would set, let's say, the counter to a particular number. Let's say you have, an input or text box, right? And you have it say input where you want the counter to start at, right? So let's say you want to start it at 100 seconds. You would use the set counter method right here to set your counter at 100 seconds. And then you would do use effect, but instead of set counter adding +1, you would do set counter minus 1. And that way count down. Once you get to 0, then you can have it stop. And then you can, you would have some sort of, conditional in there so that you can go ahead and make it stop at that point. I hope that makes sense. I would definitely test it out on this, Christopher. Change it to where use state started at 100 and then count it down. You could do that. All right. Thank you, Nancy, as always. I appreciate it, Christopher. That means a lot to me. Thank you so much. Have a great night, everybody. Nancy, I will see you tomorrow in class. Take care, everybody. Night.